History remembers the men, the generals, the soldiers, the famous names etched in stone. But what about the secrets whispered in dimly lit rooms? The battles fought not with guns, but with pencils and paper. What if I told you that long before Alan Turing's famous machine word to life, the key to cracking Hitler's unbreakable Enigma code was first discovered by a woman? This is the story of the brilliant minds the history books almost forgot, the women who saw the patterns no one else could. Let's rewind to the 1920s. Europe is in a fragile peace, but the gears of the next great conflict are already turning. Germany is developing a revolutionary piece of technology, the Enigma machine. It looked like a typewriter, but it was a fortress of secrets. With its rotating wheels and complex wiring, it could scramble a simple message into one of 159 quintillion possible combinations. For the Allies, it was a terrifying prospect. An unbreakable code meant Germany could coordinate its U-boats and armies in total secrecy, spelling doom for any opposition. The best minds across Europe were put on the case, and they all came back with the same conclusion. It was mathematically unbreakable. But in Poland, a group of brilliant mathematicians at the Polish Cipher Bureau thought differently. They believed no code was truly unbreakable. Among them were Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Yicki, and Henryk Zygalski, names now legendary in cryptography. They were the first to apply pure mathematics to the problem, a revolutionary approach. But they weren't alone. Working alongside them, often uncredited, were dozens of civilian women, recruited from universities for their sharp minds and meticulous attention to detail. These women were the human computers of their day. They weren't just assistants. They were the engine room of the entire operation. Imagine the scene: a quiet room, away from the prying eyes of the world, filled with the soft scratching of pencils and the rustle of paper. For hours on end, these women would pore over endless columns of gibberish, intercepted German radio messages. Their task was tedious, yet vital. They catalogued, cross-referenced, and searched for tiny, almost imperceptible repetitions or patterns. Every single letter was a clue. It was a painstaking process, a hunt for a needle in an infinite haystack. While the male mathematicians worked on the high-level theory, it was the women who processed the raw data that made their breakthroughs possible. And then came the breakthrough. One of the key figures in this early work was a woman whose name is often lost to history, but whose contribution was immense. While sources from the era are scarce and often classified, we know that it was the tireless work of these female analysts that provided Marian Rejewski with the specific data he needed. They were the ones who noticed subtle patterns in the daily keys, the little human errors made by German operators. For instance, they noticed operators sometimes chose lazy keys, like AAA or ABC, or their own initials. These tiny cracks in the armor of Enigma were everything. It was based on this foundational work, this mountain of data meticulously compiled by his female colleagues, that Rejewski was able to deduce the internal wiring of the Enigma rotors. He didn't have a machine to inspect. He did it with pure logic, mathematics, and the patterns the women had found. He cracks the unbreakable code. This was years before the war even began, years before Bletchley Park became the famous hub of codebreaking we know today. The Poles had done the impossible. They had built their own working replicas of the Enigma machine, which they called Bombes, to mechanize the search for the daily keys. The secret was out, but only to a select few. As the shadow of German invasion loomed over Poland in 1939, the Polish Cipher Bureau made a fateful decision. They knew they couldn't hold on to their secret for long. In a clandestine meeting in the forests outside Warsaw, they handed over everything to their British and French allies, to replica Enigma machines, their schematics, and all of their groundbreaking methods. It was one of the most significant intelligence transfers in history, a gift that would ultimately change the course of the war. When the British team at Bletchley Park received this package, they weren't starting from scratch. They were standing on the shoulders of giants, the Polish mathematicians, and the unsung women who had paved the way. Now, let's journey to Bletchley Park, the Buckinghamshire estate that became the new heart of the Allied code-breaking effort. When you think of Bletchley, you probably picture Alan Turing, a genius haunted by his own brilliance, surrounded by a handful of male academics. And while Turing was absolutely central, that picture is incomplete. By 1944, over 75% of the staff at Bletchley Park were women. That's nearly 10,000 women. They were recruited from all walks of life. Linguists, mathematicians, and even crossword puzzle champions scouted from newspapers. They were known as the Debs of Bletchley Park or the Wrens, and their work was top secret. They signed the Official Secrets Act, forbidden from speaking about their work to anyone, not their families, not their friends, not even each other if they worked in different huts. They carried the weight of the war on their shoulders in total silence. Imagine living that life. You go to work every day, performing tasks that directly impact the lives of soldiers, sailors, and airmen. But you have to pretend it's just a boring administrative job. The pressure must have been immense. One of these remarkable women was Joan Clarke. You might remember her from the film The Imitation Game, but her real story is even more impressive. She was a brilliant mathematician, a Cambridge graduate who was initially recruited for a clerical role simply because she was a woman. Her male superiors quickly realized their mistake. She was promoted to work directly with Turing in Hut 8. The elite section focused on cracking the naval enigma used by the German U-boats. The U-boats were strangling Britain, sinking supply ships, and threatening to starve the island nation into submission. Cracking their code was a matter of survival. Joan wasn't just an assistant. She was Turing's equal. She became a master of Bombe, a complex statistical method developed by Turing to exploit weaknesses in the naval enigma. It was an incredibly difficult, mentally taxing process that involved comparing pairs of intercepted messages on long sheets of perforated paper to find likely rotor settings. Joan not only mastered it, but improved upon it. She was so valuable that she was eventually promoted to deputy head of Hut 8, the only woman to hold such a senior position at She even had to be given a pay raise and a promotion disguised as a linguist because there was no protocol for a female cryptanalyst of her rank. While geniuses like Turing and Clarke devised the methods, the sheer volume of work required an army of operators. This is where the women of the bombs rooms came in. The bombs were the electromechanical machines, designed by Turing and Gordon Welchman. The operators, almost all of whom were members of the Women's Royal Naval Service, the Wrens, had the physically and mentally demanding job of running them 24/7. Their job was to plug in cables and switches according to the menus provided by the set the machine running and listen for the moment it stopped. A stop meant a potential solution, a possible key to that day's code. They would then run a check, and if it was valid, the information would be rushed to the analysts. This was not simple machine minding. It was intense, high-pressure work. The constant noise, the pressure to work quickly and without error, the knowledge that a mistake could cost lives. It was a heavy burden, yet these women did it, shift after shift, for years. The intelligence gleaned from their work, codenamed Ultra, was a war winner. It gave the Allies unprecedented insight into German strategy. They knew where U-boats would be, allowing supply convoys to be reached. They learned about troop movements before an attack, giving commanders a critical advantage. Ultra-intelligence was vital in the Battle of the Atlantic, the D-Day landings, and countless other engagements. Historians estimate that the work done at Bletchley Park shortened the war by at least 2 years, saving millions of lives. And it was all made possible by this secret army of women. After the war, their story ended as quietly as it began. They were all debriefed, reminded of the Official Secrets Act, and sent home. They were told to forget what they did, to burn any notes, and to tell people they'd simply done some sort of secretarial work. And they obeyed. For decades, they kept their promise. Their husbands, children, and friends never knew that these seemingly ordinary women had been at the forefront of the greatest intellectual battle of the 20th century. Joan Clarke continued her work in cryptography, but remained largely unknown to the public. The Wrens went back to civilian life, their incredible contributions locked away. It wasn't until the 1970s, when the secrets of Bletchley Park were finally declassified, that their stories began to emerge. Slowly, tentatively, these women, now in their later years, began to speak. They wrote memoirs, gave interviews, and reconnected with their fellow codebreakers. The world finally began to understand the true scale of their achievement. They weren't just footnotes in Alan Turing's story. They were the story itself. Without the foundational data analysis by the Polish women, Rejewski's breakthrough might never have happened. Without the thousands of women operating the bombs and analyzing intercepts at Bletchley Park, Turing's genius could never have been applied on the industrial scale needed to win the war. So, the next time you hear the story of the Enigma code, remember it's not just a story about one machine or one man. It's a story about collaboration, persistence, and quiet, uncelebrated brilliance. It's the story of the Polish women who first hunted for patterns in the static of Joan Clarke, who stood as an intellectual equal among men, and of the 10,000 Wrens who turned the tide of the war in total secrecy. They were the ones who truly cracked Hitler's code, not just with machines, but with their minds, their dedication, and their silent sacrifice. Thank you so much for watching. The history we're taught is often just one version of the story, and it's so important to uncover these hidden figures. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the history you thought you knew. Let me know in the comments what other unsung heroes you think deserve the spotlight. Until next time, stay curious.